Wow. Good morning to the Tuesday, 9 o'clock public meeting of the BOCC. We'll start the meeting. We'll rise with flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Commissioner Mortensen, do you want to give us a review of the minutes, please?
Mr. Chairman, as usual, I reviewed the minutes of the activities last week and I move to approve those minutes.
Any comments, questions on the minutes?
None for me.
I see none. I would ask for a motion. Oh, you already motioned, sorry. I'd ask for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, what is odd? There are only 17 people on Zoom and an almost empty
I know,
room.
we're pretty,
They know we're all headed over to the 911 center for ribbon
must
cutting.
be. We have, we'll go through the agenda today. We do at 9:45. We do have a public meeting, so our public hearing, so we'll probably be cognizant of that. I will add, we also we don't use well, it's available today too, but we have KLTV on Tuesdays, but we also have our own channel now, a live channel that you can tune into. It's a YouTube channel, so. Let's run through the consent agenda. We have a call for bids, sealed bids for the Cathlamet road slide repair project. That will be out till August 22nd, 2023. Request for proposal for real estate broker firms to aid in the sale, lease, and licensing and purchasing of Cowlitz County property. So that RFP will be sent out. Agreements, contracts, bid awards. We have one amendment to a personal services agreement with BHC Consulting. This involves the landfill. It's additional 200,000 with it extends the expiration date to March 31st, 2024. This a little larger than we typically see, but we added cell 10 to this. That was not part of this original contract. We added cell 10 to this. So it's a little larger than we normally see. Interlocal agreement with Harris County Department of Education. We do that with agencies that give us provide us with preferred pricing on products that we use. Harris County, we do it with people no matter where they are. It actually happens to be in Houston, Texas area. And then a agreement renewal with Humana Group Medical Advantage Plan for 2024. Board correspondence. We have a letter to Richard Black appointing him to the Veterans Advisory Board. We have a memo from the Consolidated Diking Improvement District number 2 showing us it's basically their budget that they have. And then we have a letter from July 24th from Lindsay Osborne, Program Manager of the Office of the Washington State Auditor. Our annual audit is coming up. They'll reading through it. They'll do a financial statement audit. They do a federal single audit, which is basically compliance with programs. And then a accountability audit, which basically is compliance with RCW. Vouchers in the amount of $3,158,321.52. And that's it for consent agenda. If anybody has any questions or comments.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one question
Sure.
on the Diking Improvement District number 2 budget report. This was an estimate for next year's budget, but in it, it noted that their budget for this year was set at 5.2 million. And at the end of June, they had already spent 6.5 million. And I was wondering, there must be some project they're in the middle of. Susan, I don't know if you can help. That just seems a little bit out of the ordinary. That was a big jump up, unless that was an error in the memo. That's a large expenditure over the
Yeah.
budgeted amount. That doesn't make sense.
It surprises me also. I'm not sure of any project.
That's not one of your.
CD 82 is one of is Woodland.
That's Woodland,
And
okay.
I do not know of any big project that they have under construction right now. If you had told me that about Lexington, it would not have surprised me
Right.
as much. It might be a typo.
Can we just pull that out for a week and maybe look into that?
Yes,
for
I'll
us?
have
Yeah.
them look into
Okay.
it and we'll resubmit.
I don't
that.
have a problem with the proposed budget, but I'm
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
little nervous about approving a document that's out of whack.
Oh, yeah, I will have staff look into
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Good catch. Thank you.
I have no objection at all. Makes good sense. However, I don't understand how to rationalize it when the board correspondence, we're just acknowledging we received it.
Right.
Okay.
But the information listed that anomaly, so I said.
That's step two.
okay,
I
yeah,
mean, step one here is we have received it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just for the public, I continually isn't somewhat of an exaggeration. I get from time to time questions about what's the meaning of claims? Are we violating something? And it's probably good just to let the public know, no, that just means we're paying our bills.
Yeah. We call them claims. In other world, they'll call them accounts payable.
Yeah.
Just difference in terminology. And any other questions on the consent agenda? I would entertain a motion pulling the one out. I know it's just a correspondence thing, but it'll trigger us to
bring it back.
bring it back and have an answer on it.
I move approval of the consent agenda with the exception of item B under number 6.
Any questions, concerns? Sean had his hand up for a moment. Looks like we're okay. Okay, seeing none, I would call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Consent agenda passes. We have a couple motion items from Public Works.
So good morning, Commissioners. Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. The first motion item that we have is the local agency agreement and prospective for federal funding for the Rose Valley Road culvert replacement project. This is a culvert replacement out at milepost 7.72. For those of you who are familiar with Rose Valley, that is just beyond Libby Lane. So this culvert was damaged in the January 2022 storm event. At that time, we did an emergency repair. So the end of the culvert, we lost several end sections off the culvert. It ate into the embankment. So in February, March, we were out there, had a contractor on an emergency basis to Band-Aid the culvert back together and repair the embankment. This agreement is with WashDOT for emergency relief funding to pay for those emergency repairs we completed and the design and the final construction. So at this time, we'd be obligating just over $190,000 for the design and the emergency repair project. And we will come back to you once the design is complete to obligate the construction dollars.
And is that 100% covered or?
So the emergency repair is 100% covered. The engineering and final construction is 86.5% covered.
And any fish barrier removal funds coming our way for that?
There's no fish barrier removal funds coming as part of this. This is just a federal emergency repairs.
You wouldn't care to guess why it's 86.5, not 86.6, say?
It has been 86.5 for as long as I've worked with WashDOT. And for some reason, this funding is 86.5. They have other programs where they pay 90, others they pay 100, and then there's one program they pay 80. So it just depends which pot of money that's coming from, what our match is. And yes, I try and keep them all in my head and I mix them up sometimes.
Yeah, so we will be paying the 190 and then we'll get reimbursed 86.5% of that. Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't see anything. I would pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the local agency agreement and prospectus as has been discussed.
Okay. Last call for questions. I see no hands. I would call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Also vote aye. Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item we have in front of you is from the Water and Sewer Division. It's a bid award for the Camelot Reservoir Roof Replacement Project to be awarded to Slate Co. LLC for an amount of $308,717.64. The existing roof on the Camelot Reservoir was damaged by a tree falling on it. The timber roof will be replaced with a concrete panel roof to improve its durability. We are also, as part of this project, painting the reservoir and fencing the entire reservoir site for added security.
How many customers does that serve?
I honestly don't know.
It's not a very large.
No, it
group.
serves that Camelot neighborhood that's right there.
So this is one of those examples where we ended up inheriting a system that was privately installed and we ended up taking it over. But fact of the matter is, we're probably subsidizing these kind of repairs from the system as a whole, where there are more people kicking in.
Yes,
funding.
so from the system of the whole, everybody pays the same rate. So some years we pay more towards one system than another. So yes, it would seem that way. This system we inherited after Mount St. Helens. It was one that was damaged during the eruption, and that's when we inherited this system.
And this isn't one that we designated for ARPA funds?
No, for
Right.
this roof replacement, no, we have designated ARPA funds for the replacement of the Camelot loss system, the large on-site septic system. So
Septic
that's a
system, okay.
project you'll be seeing shortly. It's at about 75% design right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Just for clarity, when we say system, we're talking about throughout the county is in charge of a few facilities.
Yes.
We treat them as one unit.
We use them as one unit. We have, I believe it's 4 sewer systems and 1, 2, 3, and I have 4 water, I believe is the number in various locations.
And they're not all in the same.
No,
A
we-
few of them are separate locations.
yes, we have up in Riderwood. We provide water to Tootle, 2 different systems up in Tootle, and they both receive water from the Castle Rock system. We partner with them to obtain the water. We have a sewer system up in Tootle, and then we have a sewer system at Woodbrook, and then Camelot, we have water and sewer.
And for those who don't know, Woodbrook is Ostrander.
Yes.
Thank you.
Dennis, did you want to talk about the $1 million for Riderwood?
Oh, for Riderwood. Did that get announced on Saturday?
No,
You didn't have the
it wasn't
opportunity to.
discussed.
We did get notification. I think, Susan, you got a copy of the letter from Congress that they have approved, a congressionally approved $1 million for upgrading the Riderwood water system. One of our requests that made it through
Yes,
so far.
so far.
That assumes the Congress finally does agree, Senate and the House. This is about the time they start passing concurrent resolutions because they can't quite come to an agreement. So it's not money in the bank quite yet, but we also, that same legislation also authorized $180,000 on sediment monitoring
Right.
for Cowlitz Valley. So
Yeah. Which is
that's
good.
important. That I'm glad to see that now kind of in the system. So
Are you headed up Thursday?
Yes,
Representative Perez is going to be up in Riderwood and she had sent out notification to some, so.
Oh, yeah. Could you tell us what that grant means to the Riderwood facilities?
so we are in the process and the board had kindly put towards the Riderwood system some ARPA money to do an emergency system upgrade. And we've gone through a study and the recommendation was to put a raw reservoir adjacent to the existing plant, which will provide us some redundancy during drought conditions. And we are in the process of designing that and then reaching out and working with our neighbors to purchase a little property and getting a new raw water reservoir installed.
the Daily News this morning mentioned that Cowlitz River at Kelso is now at late October levels of water. So I'm sure the Campbell Creek is probably pretty low right now too. It's,
It's a nice trickle.
yeah.
Yeah, a thing to note, as I've often said, money is a fungible thing, even though this is a priority item. With the help, we can do other things. And that's actually
Right.
pretty important to
Yeah.
realize that.
Yeah, exactly. Back to the, any other questions on
For a
the,
motion?
on the replacement? I would, pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move we award the bid to Slateco LLC for the Camelot Reservoir Roof Replacement Project in the amount of $308,717.64.
Let's call for questions, comments.
One final comment.
Yeah.
There's a gentleman in the audience who hasn't asked us what he almost always asks us. How many bids did we have? How did we choose Slateco?
Looked like 3 different bids.
3 bidders. They are about $4,000 below the engineer's estimate. And then the next bidder was $12,000 above them. Slateco is, sorry, I can't read the address without my glasses. Slateco is a Woodland, Washington business, and they have done similar projects in the past. So we are moving forward with their bid.
So, and then along those lines, there's a keyword or responsible. And how big a factor does responsible play in your choices?
So a non-responsible bidder is rejected, which means they have filings at the Department of Revenue and L&I that make them not eligible to bid on public works contracts.
Now, is that because they have failed to follow up on taxes or laws as opposed to failure to comply with a contract?
It's taxes and laws that they get.
Okay, so if they had past history of only doing a sloppy job, you wouldn't really be privy to that in advance and couldn't use that.
Correct. It's very difficult for us to put a contractor on a no bid list for poor workmanship. We do put qualifications in some of our bids, and it wasn't in this particular one, but some of our large earthwork projects, such as up at the landfill and our paving project, that they have had to have done X amount cubic yards of earthwork or tons of asphalt in order to qualify, to make sure that they are a large enough company to handle the project.
And percentage wise is spread on the bids on this one?
The
Just
2 low
ballpark.
bidders are close.
Yeah.
So they're about 300, and then the high bidder was in the 400,000. So they were way off from the other 2. So I don't.
High bid was 483.
483?
Yes.
483.
Mhm.
But like she said, the other 2 were pretty close, 308 and
Yeah.
Yeah.
312, 320, something like that.
Any anticipated change orders?
I do not anticipate one, but I would not guarantee there won't be one.
Okay, so, in the past, we know we anticipate change orders because we're doing an estimate on a 50% design or something like that, and you've got to operate like that frequently. But in this case, it seems like it'd be an open and shut kind
It's
of thing.
unless, which is possible, unless when we would take the old roof off, we find something else that we don't know of, there is the potential of something else coming up.
Okay, but that has to be something that could not have been foreseen. So if they forgot to go inside and look up, that's on them, right?
On the,
On a roof, let's say. And I don't know this situation specifically, what kind of roof. If they had access to the view, to all views, and they did not take advantage of an access to a view, that's, the contract says you have inspected everything, and this is,
so they bid on what we have on the plans, telling them what they are to replace and what they are to do. So
so if what they open it up, they find that, things aren't the same, then they have a cause.
yes,
They may not always come and inspect the place. They may just sometimes go off your plans that you're telling them.
yes. And on this particular project, they did have a pre-bid meeting that they
So they
met them
did,
out on the site.
did physically see the
Yes.
site. Yeah. Okay.
So one of the ironies of lowest responsible bid, that responsibility is you can be a brand new company and not have any nicks against you without any experience. But if they're licensed and, if they're approved by the state as being a legitimate business, you got to accept their bid until proven wrong, right? That's
Yes.
the way it goes.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Right.
If I could step backwards. Yeah, there. If I could step backwards on item number 7, just the question. Interesting that you have an engineer's estimate before preliminary engineering is even done. That's pretty tough. And then who is providing the preliminary engineering?
So, right, the preliminary engineering estimate that we came up with is done by staff. We've been out there and looked at the site, and we know what size culvert is currently in place. And we've done a rough estimate of what we think will go in its place. So based on past construction, prices one of the staff engineers came up with the total project of just over 1.4 million. And then you base on what the construction cost is, what you estimate your engineering cost to be.
Okay, so I missed that. So who is doing the preliminary engineering?
So right now, Public Works staff has
Your
done
staff.
this. Yes, we will have to go out for consultants for the geotechnical portion of this project.
Okay, so these funds that are being approved are for staff
Yes.
services. Thank you.
I think it may be important to note, I think this is true. Unfortunately, you're here, we'll straighten this out. These engineering estimates are for our own internal purposes. They're not put out in the bid or anything like that. It's presumably private information at some point.
That is actually not true. When we go out for a public bid, engineered estimates are public record.
Oh, really?
And so the contractors will generally ask, what's your engineer's estimate on this project? And we provide it to them.
That bothers me.
And on a project such as the Culvert project, we have to provide the state with an engineer's estimate prior to going out to bid. And that is one of the things you look at when you review your bids. If your engineer's estimate is $1 million and everybody comes in at $2.5, $3 million, that always makes us go, okay, we missed something in there. Let's go back. And that would be a case where we might come to the board and say, we're requesting to reject all bids.
But you would know that, and that's important, but you would know that absent them knowing what your internal estimate is.
Yes.
I'm just saying, when they know the engineering estimate, we give them a target. And I really would prefer in general not to do that, but I don't have any choice.
We've had a couple of occasions where that has happened and you've recommended that we reject all the bids because
Yes.
there was something that was missed and we went back and figured it out and then later came back with corrected figures.
Yes, and we've done reject all bids because everybody's been high. We've also had situations where we've rejected bids because we have this one really crazy lowball or a couple crazy lowball, and it's like, okay, something's weird. They're setting us up they found something in the plans that they think is a hotbed for change orders. So we have come to the board and asked to reject all bids, and we rework the plans before we send them back out.
And then we have the situation every once in a while, like you hinted at, that there was something under the ground that nobody knew about that was very difficult to work with. And man, then the arguing goes on for a while. And we had one on Ostrander or on Delameter Road, I think was a very difficult one that contractor
Delameter
had
was
to.
Yeah, Delameter was a difficult project. We've had some other projects where we've been building walls where we've gone out and when you build a wall or a bridge foundation, you have a geotech go out. They do 2 to 4 borings and they always write in their reports, this represents the spot we took the boring and who knows what's going on 50 feet away. And so we've run into lots of those situations where we've come in with change orders because we found underground situations that nobody could have known about.
Yeah. Any other questions on the roof replacement?
Getting back to-
Seeing none, we have a motion on it.
Right.
I would just call for the vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I also vote aye. Thank you, Susan. for
Thank
your
you.
Time, appreciate it. We have, next motion is from the sheriff. I see Brad.
Yes, good morning. What you have before you is an interlocal agreement with the city of Longview, and it pertains to Federal Department of Justice funds under the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program. This is a program we've received funding for many years for drug enforcement and also drug prevention. As of about a year ago, we no longer receive funds from them for drug enforcement. However, there's a few programs that continue to receive funding through this, including our local drug court and our juvenile center receives some counseling funds. This portion of it is for a school resource officer for the city of Longview, and they've received these funds for many years. And essentially, this is just a waiver of the county's right to, I guess, go after those same funds, which we have not done before and don't plan to. And it's in the amount of $11,852, and it just augments their a school resource officer program that Longview runs in their 2 high schools and involves 2 full-time officers. So this is really a small portion of their program. And we're just, as commissioners, you'd be waiving the right to for us to apply for those funds and allow Longview to do so.
Any questions?
And this just amounts to a pass through of funds, right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any particular questions on that? Seems pretty straightforward.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the interlocal agreement with the city of Longview as has been discussed by our sheriff.
Last chance.
In my experience as a classroom teacher, I know the school resource officer has been very good in building relationships between teenagers and police officers. And that's oftentimes not normally the case. There's oftentimes animosity, but the resource officer does an excellent job.
Yeah, I would comment on that too. I like the concept of keeping things on a local scale and community. And we each have different jobs, but we're all a member of the same community. And I would point out that we have that here and we should treasure that and keep that in mind.
Yeah, right. My daughter teaches, well, my daughter and son-in-law teach high school in Battleground, and they say the same things about the resource officer. They think he's a pretty good asset, so. Have a motion? We can call for the vote. All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
I also vote aye. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Jennifer, thank you, Brad.
Good morning.
Morning, Jennifer.
So today we have a modification to an existing grant with the Forest Service. It's Interagency Agreement number 20 PA with a bunch of numbers behind that. I just call it 20 PA for our needs. Through Title II funding, we have been awarded $30,000 to help continue our invasive plant treatments within the Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument. This funding is able to be used through 2025. So we will be using parts of it each year until then to accomplish our treatments and surveys up there.
Any
Jennifer, I did have a question in studying the maps.
Yeah.
It looked like there was a huge area between Coldwater and Johnson or Harry's Ridge that are infested. But then there were some smaller areas that I think are the target areas for this grant. Is that infestation as wide as it looks like on that map, or was that just a coloring error on the part of the geographer?
My guess is that we know where the infestations do exist based on accessible areas, but I imagine there are many inaccessible areas that may be infested that we cannot access due to terrain or other issues. So a lot of our project focuses along the trails and rights of ways and parking areas and other known wildlife grazing areas. So what you see is the areas that are mapped are areas we know infestations exist based on where we're able to see. I really think there is more noxious weeds up there than we're able to get to each year, but we do our best to try to treat the more isolated small infestations first to prevent those from becoming larger areas, and then working on the larger polygons, trying to draw them back in size.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any,
a good question, Jennifer, I had mentioned that in fact, I took a picture of some tansy and I found that on one of my hikes, and I needed you to confirm it was tansy. And then my next question would be for the legality of me being able to pull up the weed. After speaking to you, I was on another walk somewhere else, and I pulled up a couple of tansies and threw them in a trash bin. So maybe the landfill is going to get some outgrowth of tansy. But if I'm walking along a split rail fence and I don't know who owns the property right there, and there's a tansy just on the other side of the split rail fence, would you find it reasonable for me to reach over and pull it up?
I would question that just because it could be a private property owner. If it was on public lands, I don't think any of our public agencies would have an issue with a citizen removing a tansy. But if it's on a private land, I would be wary. Just we don't want to be trespassing on private lands. So I would use caution. I would make sure you know who whose property you're removing it from first.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's exactly what I wish to know.
And as in terms of it going to the landfill, I did take a tour of the landfill this year, and I'm confident that any tansy that makes it there is well buried. So
oh, okay.
Very good.
I was going to
Thank
say Commissioner Mortensen's out there spreading tansy across the county.
it will be well buried, and if not buried, taken care of at the landfill. They have a decent operation going on there in terms of preventing the spread of noxious weeds. So.
And then at some point, there's so many hands, so many people hiking and all that. I'm wondering if at some point we wouldn't find an opportunity to help eradicate some of those places where we just really cannot assemble an organized team, but we can talk about that offline.
Yeah, I have been working with a group called the Mountaineers to do a couple of weed removal events up on the mountain. So that's been an ongoing thing for the last few years, and I'm looking at ways to expand that volunteer opportunities up there.
I guess I could venture the thought of a contest, you know,
Yeah.
over the next 3 months. Something like, you know, we've got a bounty on pike, you know, apparently that's a good program. I don't know, maybe Dennis can tell me if that's useful.
Okay,
We ready for a motion?
yep.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve modification number 2 to the Interagency Agreement 20 PA ... with the U.S. Forest Service for the removal of invasive plants within the Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument in the amount of $30,000.
Any questions, comments? Seeing none, I call for the vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also vote aye. Motion passes. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
We have a public meeting in a couple minutes. A couple updates for you. We have no afternoon meeting today. No 1:30 PM meeting today. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we'll have a juvenile detention and probation. We'll be in if you're interested in listening to some of them. Over the weekend, Commissioner Mortensen and myself, Sheriff Thurman, Senator Wilson,
And Judge Basher.
and Judge Basher were out at the Riderwood Festival. If you've never been to Riderwood, it's worth a drive. It's a great little community, and it was they're actually celebrating their 100 years. That's where Longview set up the first lumber mill, and a lot of construction around here contains lumber from that area. Quite a history. I thought they did a real fine job. I'll make a plug. If you did not watch last Wednesday's meeting, we had drug court in, and we had this room pretty much full. And if you want to hear what went on with that and some of the discussion, I thought a lot of it was pretty good, and it might be worth pulling up KLTV or whatever and just watching that. Anything you gentlemen like to add?
Just to correct, it's not a KLTV because it was a Wednesday,
It's
so it would be
Zoom.
It would be Zoom. Yeah. Yeah, Riderwood has some interesting history, and Dennis, I'm sure, could fill us out a lot. One of the more interesting things was how big a problem it was to be able to drive golf carts on a state highway, because that's a state highway that goes right through the town and stops.
Yeah, and they have a lot of golf carts.
Yeah, and it's also a 55 and older community, and
Yeah.
every now and then there's an attack on people wanting to change that, and definitely the tone of the people there is, don't do that to us.
Yeah,
The one and only time we had a commissioner meeting outside of these chambers was to approve the ordinance allowing golf carts to be used on the streets in Riderwood. And they were first of all excited to have us, because usually the news from the county is that their water and sewer rates go up, or water rates go up anyway. And so they were pretty pleased to be able to have that. And it is almost otherworldly to be parking your car in amongst all those golf carts,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, you go out there and drive around the block a couple times, they don't know you, you'll see those golf carts. They'll pull up and ask you. So we will open up for public comment. We only have about 5 minutes till the public hearing, but certainly open up and any comments that we want.
While people interrupt us when they wish to speak, the there was a 50-year time capsule that was prepared while we were there.
Yeah. And they topped it with, I should have listened better at the history. It's a statue of, I want to say the first logger that was killed out, one of the first loggers out there, and he died in an accident, but his granddaughter was sitting in front of us, and she was the Grand Marshal of the parade.
Right.
And she's probably, I hate to guess people's age, but I'm saying closing in on 90. She
I'll
was
take
older and
that.
frail. Yeah. And so that was kind of cool. She was pretty excited to see her grandfather being done up like that.
And the statue was appropriately made out of a chainsaw carving of a log
Yeah.
and heavily coated with epoxy varnish is what
Yeah.
said. And they will take that statue in for when things get cold and rainy and snowy.
Yeah.
So originally, the logging camp was called Camp Morse after S.M. Morse, who was the Long Bell executive placed in charge of overall development. And he did not like that at all and didn't want his name on that. And so they did change it to Ryder Wood, named for Bill Ryder, who was the timber scout hired by Long Bell to find the best stand of timber on the West Coast. And he searched from the redwoods all the way up through the Olympic Peninsula and zeroed in on this stand of trees. And when Ari Long and Ryder and the group came out to inspect the timber, these were lumbermen from the Mississippi River Valley. They were used to trees, pretty good sized trees. And they were absolutely shocked. The trees were so big out here that in order to keep the huge logs from shattering once they were cut down, they cut down smaller trees the size of what Long Bell harvested back in the Mississippi Delta, just as a cushion. And they were just shocked. So the logs were big enough that they were able to build a 2-bedroom home out of the lumber from just one log. And they built the world's largest lumber mills. And within 30 years, those logs were all gone.
Yeah.
They all came down on the railroad to the mills here in Longview.
While we were there, we met a very tall gentleman named Bob, and he had been born in Ryderwood quite a while back. Ryderwood, I mean, it seems obvious now that if you have trouble, you go shopping at Winco or the Dollar General or whatever it is. Back then, there was nothing. So you got to tip your hat to the people who carved things out of nothing.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, he did point out the home he thought he was born in.
Yeah.
He was even my senior, so he definitely was Rick's senior. Because he's the youngest here, you know.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. So. Sometimes a minute seems like a long time.
Well, I was thinking an update on still that Ryderwood. They expected some number of people, and they were only off by, they looked to me, a factor of two. They had a breakfast in their hall, and this is the really nice kind of thing where it just essentially a bunch of tables lining up straight line, and you sit and you might know the person right next to you, you might not. But they were scrambling, all volunteers.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, it's 9:45. We'll let you go. Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Commissioners. Anna Lunde, Public Works. Today's hearing revolves around a application for a franchise agreement for Sprint Telecommunications. In December of 2002, they applied and received a franchise agreement that expired in December of 2022. So in front of us today is a new franchise agreement to establish telecommunications for a 10-year non-exclusive franchise. This franchise was negotiated between our PA office and the representing attorneys for Sprint. It includes the standard insurance and standard locates. And anytime they choose to adjust the existing equipment that is pre-existing already in our right-of-ways, they would be performing that under application of performing work within the county right-of-way, as well as adhering to the utility accommodations policy. It includes no annual fees, no franchise fees, but they are required to pay all publication, staff time, T&M fees before we would record it, and they have a 30-day window to return a signed franchise application back to the county. Questions?
So they reimburse us for our costs, basically?
Yes, they do.
Yeah. And this is an existing one that they're already using and serves probably a good number of people.
Correct. It starts at county line, follows Barnes Drive south, and it goes after Barnes Drive. It will connect onto Pacific Avenue through Bond Road all the way to the city of Kelso, and then it skirts over to Longview and over the Lewis and Clark Bridge into Oregon south on
Wow.
Highway 30.
So Anna, I'm curious, looking at the map that you handed out to me in the legend, you have red and black lines, both labeled fiber buried. What's the difference?
So Sprint actually presents the maps, and that is an internal definer for their own company. It doesn't have anything for us to really indicate.
And the resolution that you handed out to us basically has us declaring that it is in the public's interest to allow this use within the public's right of way.
Yes, it is in the public's best interest.
And it sets up the rules where they have to pay for any damage done to the public right of way
Correct.
upon installation or any other changes. And if they cease operation, they have to pay to remove the material.
Correct.
Okay. That's right.
Any other questions?
I only have a mechanical question or a trivial question. Sprint and T-Mobile, I don't remember, I've lost track of all these things. T-Mobile owns Sprint now?
I believe it's Sprint that owns T-Mobile.
Right. Okay, the other way around. All right, thank you. Just in case, in part of history, CDMA is a technology that was developed in the United States, and the first deployment of a CDMA was in Kansas City by Sprint. That was probably it's somewhere in the 1980s. Anyhow, that was really important to say.
Yeah.
To say.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, I'll open for public comment. If there's any. I see none. I don't see any hands raised. We'll quickly, we'll just close public comment.
I think it's up to us to make a motion. Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the contract, the resolution, I should say, that has been presented to us and discussed in some amount of detail.
Okay, we have a motion. I see no hands. Call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also vote aye. Thank you, Anna. How's the finger?
Thank you. It's doing well.
Okay. Public comment, if we have, it's your time if you want it. Okay, I don't see any. Election day, gonna be a busy day for some. You'll be glad this day is over, right? Yeah. Okay, seeing no other public comment,
I just update folks, apparently the last day or so, we got to 20% of people voting, yeah. And I had mentioned earlier before people were here, before we actually began this session, that it's always been of interest to me to put Cowlitz County as a showcase for the nation, but particularly for the state. And can you imagine what would happen if for this primary election, we had a turnout of 65% or more? We would be in the national papers. We would be the talk of the country. And it's such an easy thing for us to do. But when you vote, make sure you know what you're checking on the ballot.
okay. Thank you all. We will adjourn.